At its peak, Genghis Khan's empire covered 22% of the Earth's landmass. For comparison, that's nearly 9.3 million square miles, larger than all of North America. But this figure conceals a grim truth. It wasn't built by an army, but by a biological species adapted to conditions that would kill you in weeks. Forget glory and conquest. We begin our journey with one person, you, and your first sip of water from a steppe river. That sip alone could be deadly, and it's just the first of hundreds of reasons why you wouldn't survive here. Imagine a world without farms, almost devoid of vegetables and bread, only wind, grass, and animals. A Mongol childhood wasn't about play, it was a school of survival. From the age of 3, a child learned to ride a horse. Often they were simply tied to the saddle, literally becoming one with the animal. Their games weren't tag, but bukh, a national wrestling art developing strength and shooting marmots with a child's bow. By 5, they were proficient archers. Their bodies adapted from birth to brutal temperature swings and a meager diet. Your body, accustomed to comfort and balanced nutrition, would be in a state of shock and deficiency from the very beginning. You wouldn't be a volunteer. In the empire, every man from 15 to 60 was the Khan's property. Conscription was a census where you and your family were registered. You'd be taken from your clan and placed into a unit with strangers speaking different dialects. You'd be assigned to an arban, a squad of 10, and a jagan, a company of 100, with people from previously hostile tribes. Tatars, Karaites, Naimans. This was brilliant social engineering, transforming enemies into brothers in arms. It was the first step toward erasing your identity. Your past life would be over. Now, you'd be a cog in the war machine. You wouldn't be issued gleaming armor. Your armor would be glued and pressed leather, perhaps with a silk shirt underneath to make arrow removal from wounds easier. Your weapons, a composite bow, a spear, a saber. Your composite bow was the high-tech weapon of that era, crafted from sinew, wood, and horn. It had a draw weight of up to 160 pounds, nearly double that of the famous English longbow. You would most likely not even be able to draw it. All of this you'd be obligated to maintain in perfect condition. Losing or breaking your weapon due to negligence wasn't a fine, it was a death sentence. And that death sentence was just one of hundreds of provisions in the Great Yasa, the code of laws that would now govern your every breath. Most of its rules carried the same penalty: death. Lying, stealing, showing cowardice, failing to share food with a hungry comrade. The punishment was the same. Urinated in a river or on a campfire, you defiled sacred elements, and for that too you'd be executed. Imagine a code where an accidental step over the threshold of a commander's yurt was equated to treason in battle. This total control was designed for one purpose: to eradicate any manifestation of individualism and transform the army into a single predictable mechanism. Your arban, your squad of 10, would now be your prison. You were responsible not just for yourself, but for the other 9. If one of you dropped your weapon in battle or fled, all 10 would be executed. This system of collective responsibility transformed battle camaraderie into a block of overseers, where everyone watched everyone else. There was nowhere to run. Your comrades wouldn't let you. In a modern army, a soldier must understand an order. In the Mongol army, they only had to obey. If a commander ordered you to attack a stone wall without ladders, you attacked. After the siege of Nishapur, where Genghis Khan's son-in-law was killed, the order wasn't just to take the city, but to exterminate all its inhabitants, including cats and dogs. A warrior couldn't ask why. He was an instrument of vengeance. Any doubt expressed aloud was a challenge to authority, punishable by death. Your initiative was punishable. The army moved in almost complete silence. No battle cries until the attack itself. All maneuvers were directed by signals from flags, drums, or smoke. At night, lanterns and whistling arrows were used. This silence exerted tremendous psychological pressure on the enemy. For you, it meant constant tension. Missed a signal, and your squad turned the wrong way, you'd have failed everyone, and the price would be terrible. The goal of this entire system was to destroy the main threat to the Khan's power: tribal loyalty. This method was first tried on the Tatars. After their defeat, all men taller than a cart's axle were executed, and the rest were dispersed among Mongol units, forever erasing them as a distinct people. Your loyalty would now belong not to family or clan, but only to your squad leader, your company commander, and ultimately to Genghis Khan. It was a complete social re-engineering. This machine had to move, and therefore, it had to be fed, but not in the way you're accustomed to. Your diet would be 90% meat and dairy, primarily lamb and mare's milk fermented into kumis. During long campaigns, when there was no time to hunt, the main source of calories was arul, dried curd as hard as stone. You'd have to soften it in your mouth or in broth for hours. This was their field ration, but without vitamin C, which modern humans get from fruits, you'd slowly be killed by scurvy, bleeding gums, falling teeth, internal hemorrhages. Your body, dependent on carbohydrates and fiber, would suffer from constant digestive upset. If a campaign dragged on, you'd switch to emergency rations. This meant making a small incision in your horse's vein and drinking its blood, mixed with milk. This technique, described by Marco Polo, allowed a warrior to sustain themselves for several days without killing the animal or stopping for a rest. For you, it would be a shock. For a Mongol, it was commonplace. Rodents, dogs, and in extreme cases, fallen comrades also served as food. That's why every warrior had 3 or 4 horses. This wasn't a luxury, but an absolute necessity. You would constantly switch tired animals, allowing the army to move almost without stopping. You'd have to be able to sleep in the saddle and shoot in any direction at a full gallop. The high saddle and iron stirrups gave you a technological advantage. You could stand upright while riding at full speed, transforming into a mobile firing platform. You had to become a centaur, otherwise you were just a dead-foot soldier. Your horse was your transport, your weapon, and your provisions. To lose it meant to die. The steppe was a world of extreme temperatures. Summer saw heat up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 Celsius, and winters brought frosts down to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, under 40 Celsius. The Mongols used winter as an ally. Frozen rivers became their roads. The invasion of Russes in the winter of 1237 was only possible because the Mongols saw icy rivers not as obstacles, but as high-speed highways. For you, however, it would be a constant battle against frostbite and hypothermia. But the most insidious enemy was filth. The Yasa forbade washing in running water, believing it angered spirits. Clothes were worn until they fell apart, almost never washed. The crowded camps became incubators for lice, the primary carriers of typhus. There was virtually no medicine. Wounds were cauterized with hot irons or smeared with fat. Any infection that an antibiotic handles today would have been a death sentence for you. But this daily struggle for survival in camp was merely a rehearsal. Once a year, the entire army participated in the Nurge, a giant drive hunt that lasted for months. Imagine a ring of tens of thousands of warriors, hundreds of kilometers in diameter. They would slowly tighten it, driving all animals toward the center. This wasn't just about gathering provisions. It was a full-scale rehearsal for war, honing coordination, encirclement tactics, and absolute discipline. If even a single hair broke through the ring due to your fault, you'd face a flogging, or worse. Every warrior learned to be part of a single relentless mechanism. Even before this mechanism appeared on the horizon, spies were sent ahead. They didn't gather intelligence, they sowed terror. They spread rumors of countless hordes and monstrous cruelty to break the will to resist even before battle. And to make the rumors plausible, the Mongols created precedents. After taking Samarkand, they truly built pyramids of severed heads. Cities were given a choice: surrender and pay tribute, or be wiped off the face of the earth. You would witness this scorched earth tactic, and it would break your psyche. In battle, you would face their signature tactic, the feigned retreat. Horse archers would shower the enemy with arrows and simulate a panicked flight. This was a deadly trap that European knights fell into at the Battle of Legnica. They broke formation and charged in pursuit, eager for glory. But the Mongols, while retreating, would shoot backward, twisting in the saddle, the famous Parthian shot. When the enemy was far enough from their lines, the fleeing Mongols would turn around and heavy cavalry would crash into the exhausted foe from the flanks. This required an iron will. You would succumb to instinct and truly run. Initially, the Mongols didn't know how to take cities, but they were brilliant learners. They rounded up captured engineers and artisans, forcing them to build siege engines. During the siege of Kaffa in 1346, they catapulted plague-ridden corpses into the city, one of the first documented biological attacks in history. As human shields during assaults on city walls, they drove captives from neighboring villages ahead of them. You could find yourself either building these machines or serving as one of those shields. This entire war machine moved at an unimaginable speed. The Mongol army could cover up to 130 kilometers, about 80 miles, a day. The legendary campaign of commanders Jibei and Subutai around the Caspian Sea covered nearly 9,000 kilometers, about 5,600 miles, in 2 years. This was possible thanks to the Yam postal relay system, fresh horses, and the absence of a cumbersome supply train. The army fed itself through hunting and plunder. Such a pace for a modern person would mean guaranteed exhaustion and death within a couple of days. And for all this pain, for this inhuman pace, you wouldn't be paid a single coin. Warriors received no wages. Your entire reward was a share of the spoils after a city was captured. But looting was strictly regulated. No one dared take even a rope before an official order. Violation was punishable by death. This transformed chaotic violence into an organized process of resource extraction. A tenth of everything went to the Khan. Another share went to the families of those killed in battle. A brutal but functioning form of social welfare. After a victory, the population was sorted like ore. Artisans, engineers, and weaponsmiths, considered valuable resources, were sent deep into the empire, to the capital Karakoram. The waste rock, the elderly and infirm were eliminated on the spot. Young, strong men were often driven to the vanguard to assault the next fortress. Young women were distributed among the warriors. You would become either a participant or a witness to this conveyor belt of death. And where would you run? For thousands of kilometers around, hostile, empty land stretched out. You'd have no map, no supplies, and crucially, your own arban would hunt you. Your comrades from yesterday, the best trackers in the world, capable of reading tracks on the ground like you read a book. They wouldn't pursue you out of malice. They'd do it out of animal fear for their own lives. Because if you escaped, they would be executed. They would find you not out of loyalty to the Khan, but to save themselves. There was no chance of surviving alone. But in this system, there was one path upward. The Mongol army was an absolute meritocracy. Origin didn't matter. A simple shepherd could become a two-man commander of 10,000. The greatest commanders, like Subutai, were not aristocrats. And Jebe, another brilliant general, was an enemy archer who, in battle, shot Genghis Khan's own horse. The Khan admired his audacity and brought him into his service. The only way to advance was to display exceptional bravery and loyalty. Every step up this hierarchy was paved with blood, but if you were lucky enough to die in battle, it wouldn't be like in the movies. More likely, it would be a barbed arrow to the gut, or a blow from a heavy mace shattering your bones. The Mongols used different arrow types, narrow, armor-piercing ones for knights, and broad cutting arrows for unarmored infantry. A hit from such an arrow to the abdomen meant a slow death from peritonitis. No medics, no evacuation. You would die a long and agonizing death on a field strewn with thousands just like you. However, it was far more likely you'd be killed not by an enemy saber, but by dysentery, typhus, or gangrene from a trivial scratch. Your immune system, accustomed to modern hygiene standards, would be defenseless against strains of E. coli from Asian rivers. Simple diarrhea amid constant marching and dehydration wouldn't be an inconvenience. It would be a death sentence. Poor sanitation and lack of clean water made every warrior a walking target for microbes. In Genghis Khan's army, there were no retired veterans. You served as long as you could hold a weapon or until you died. Unlike Roman legionaries who received land after 25 years of service, you had no pension. Your value to the empire was equal to your ability to draw a bow. If an injury rendered you crippled and unable to fight, you became a burden. At best, you might be left in some garrison. At worst, you'd simply be abandoned to your fate. So let's summarize. Your body would not have endured. An unfamiliar diet, lacking key vitamins and fiber, would lead to exhaustion and disease. Your body, a product of civilization with its antibiotics and comfort, would face a perfect storm. Scurvy from a vitaminosis, sepsis from a scratch, muscle atrophy from dysentery. This isn't a matter of willpower, it's a matter of biology. Climatic shock, from scorching heat to extreme cold, would finish off an already weakened body. Any problem, from a broken leg to a toothache, would become a death sentence. But even if your body endured, your mind would break. Modern humans are raised on the values of individualism, free will, and humanism. Genghis Khan's system was their complete antithesis. Your consciousness, shaped by ideas of human rights and personal worth, would confront a reality where you were merely expendable. Post-traumatic stress disorder, which is treated for years today, would be your constant state. Total suppression of individuality, fear of collective punishment, the necessity of participating in mass killings. All of this would trigger a psychological breakdown. You would not be able to become part of this mechanism. Genghis Khan's army was not merely an example of military might, it was history's greatest and most brutal experiment in social engineering. engineering. It proved that if you strip a person of their individuality, their connections, their will, and replace them with iron discipline and fear, you can create something that surpasses an ordinary army. You can create a living weapon, a single organism driven by one will. And the paradox is that this machine of destruction created the Pax Mongolica, an era of relative peace that connected East and West, reviving the Silk Road. But the price for this 13th century globalization was paid with millions of lives. And the main question that remains after all of this is, what is more terrifying? The empire they built, or what they had to turn humans into to achieve it?